On this Live Life Well, we're talking about a kind of a tricky question with Jennifer
Yeah.
Baker of Good Dads. How to help your children find their future, how to
Right.
steer them into a career. And despite my best efforts, not one of my daughters decided to go into journalism.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, one of our children declared he would never do what his dad does, and now he is doing even more than his dad does. So,
Okay, there you go.
so sometimes it happens.
So, and I didn't, just to be clear, I didn't push my children to go into journalism. I did ask the question, though. I did say, are you interested in this kind of career? Because I
Yeah.
can show you how this works. And the answer was just no,
No.
not at all. No. So in that situation, how do you help your children find their way?
Well, I think it's important for them, to go with something they're interested in. However, that may not be, they may be interested in that in a recreational kind of way. Like, I really enjoy doing theater, but I really don't know that I would like the lifestyle associated with theater, in that you have to work a lot of evenings and weekends.
Okay.
So I think it's really important to talk to your child about what their day-to-day, week-to-week life would look like. So maybe you want to do this, but what would that mean in terms of your life?
Yeah, because that was one of the
Right.
considerations for all three of my children. They've seen me work holidays, they've
Right.
seen me work weekends, they've seen me work early mornings. Like, I don't want to do that kind of career.
Right,
That's
right.
crazy what you do. And I'm like, sometimes you're right.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think sometimes it's important to think about what kind of lifestyle was I raised in. A family, people raised in a family with medical kinds of things, they understand the nature of being a physician or a nurse or any other kind of career that's associated with the medical practice
Yeah.
or the medical community. Likewise, education. They may understand, or they may hear their parents complain about grading papers or certain things, but they're also accustomed to having more time off than you would in some other profession. So it's not just what you like, it's also what kind of lifestyle you might like to have.
When you have a child who has no idea,
Yeah.
how do you help them explore areas they might like or they might be interested in?
Well, I really think it's a good time to have a part-time job.
Ah.
Because then you could decide, do I enjoy working with children? Could I work part-time at some organization like the YMCA or Boys and Girls Club that would employ older adolescents in that kind of capacity? Do I like working with people? Like, you might go into a job, like if you work in food service, you might not be thinking, I'm going to be a waiter or a waitress, but do I enjoy interacting with people? So that's another thing to think about. Some kids really enjoy, they're more introverts and they don't mind sitting in front of a computer all the time. If you're that kind of person, then you don't need a job that has lots of people around you. But
Yeah.
if you're really like to work with numbers, but you also really like to be with people, you may need to think about what would that mean.
So, do career days work for dads and kids or moms and their kids?
I think that can help. But I also think if your child is thinking about, let's say they want to be a mental health professional. So I've had any number of people who know me say, would you talk to my child? They're thinking about becoming a counselor, becoming a psychologist. And I could tell them what that lifestyle would be like and what those kind of career options are in that particular field. So I think it's not just shadowing, because you can't really shadow what I do, but having a conversation with someone who is good at what they do and enjoys doing it, and can be also very honest about, well, this is what this lifestyle means, this is how many years it takes to prepare for that, those sorts of things, and what that child might do now that would prepare them to maybe be accepted to a graduate program once they finish undergraduate.
What do you do in the case of a child who said, you try to have a conversation with them,
Yes.
and they say, I don't want to talk about it. I don't have to deal with that right now. I don't want to talk, and they just want to push it off and push it off. As a parent, you're not going to be like, oh, we got to do this. how do you,
Well,
or do you?
well, actually, I think you want to make it clear that once high school graduation is over, that, I mean, some people might think this is harsh, but you're not going to live here rent-free.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to need to decide if you don't want to go to college, that's perfectly fine. You may want to go to a trade school, you might want to go to OTC, you might want to learn a trade, and then later on you can always do something else. But if you're not in school and you're not working part-time, well, then you will need to get a job to pay for your rent here. And you're not helping your child by enabling them to just live in the basement or wherever without doing any contribution.
So you start at what age, and then by the senior year, you're kind of like,
Oh, I'd
this
say
is-
you need to be setting that parameter about 14 or 15 years old.
Oh,
you
that
know?
young.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that you're either going to need to learn a trade, or perhaps you're going to join the military, or perhaps you're going to go to school, or a combination of things there. But you won't just be sitting home.
You need a plan.
You need a plan. And you know what? That plan can change, but you need to say what you're going to start with.
Yeah. So if you're a parent navigating this,
Yes.
it can be tricky. What advice do you have for parents? Do you just start out with, what's your plan?
No. I mean, I think you can say to your child, I'll be happy to be helpful to you while you're figuring out your plan. Would you like to go over to OTC and see what options you could try out?
Okay.
Do you want to talk to admissions at Drury, at Missouri State, or some other college? Would you like to go on a college visit? This does not mean that you're picking that. But it does mean that, you know, you at least you're gathering information. I'd be happy to work with you on gathering information, but it doesn't mean that you have to do what I say. Now, you also need to say what you are going to do, not what they have to do. You know, sometimes a parent will say to a small child or even to an adolescent, you can't talk to me that way. Well, what are you going to do? Stuff a sock in their mouth and duct tape them? That's abusive.
Yeah. You can't do that.
You can
You
say,
should not do that.
Right, you should not do that. We don't want that. But you can say what you'll be happy to do, and that also that you will be charging them rent after a certain period of time if they're not actively engaged in going to school, working part-time, and so on. We really don't help our children out if we do everything for them, because that's not the adult world. I bet your mother didn't call you this morning and tell you to get up.
She did not, no. I think at a certain point you're calling your parents
Right.
and saying, are you okay today?
Yeah,
How are
right,
things
right.
going? You know, I'm kind of more at that stage now where
Yeah.
I'm worried about my parents more.
Right.
So it can be tricky, and you can do your best. I know I've talked to a number of parents out there who are concerned that their children are 25, 26, 27, 28, and they seem kind of aimless.
Okay, so here's
So how do
yeah,
you-
that's great.
How do you point? They're adults,
Right.
and they probably aren't living in your house. Some
Right.
are. How do you get them aimed at something?
Well, it's really not your job to get them aimed at something. And it's
Okay.
really that we often say that the person who is worrying more about the problem is owning the problem. And so if you take that responsibility, they're not going to worry about it. They have to figure out, like, I need to get my life together. Now, I need to say this, that today it's very common for young men especially not to get, not to have it figured out till maybe they're 27, 28, 29. Often by about that time they figure out, you know what, my life's not going anywhere and I need to get my act together. So that may be different than our parents, our grandparents, because they had it figured out much younger, they had families much younger, they had children, all of that much younger. But today that's kind of delayed. But often, and I've heard this from so many people, that by the time they're in their late 20s or very early 30s, most young men figure it out. Before that, as long as they're not freeloading on you, which will slow down the process,
Yeah.
you should let them figure it out. Because when they get motivated, and this is so interesting, the research on boys and school is that they often don't do as well as girls up to a certain point. But then later on, once they figure out what they want to do, man, they take off. They have very goal-directed behavior, and they can get it done in an amazing amount of time. But before that, you're kind of wasting your breath.
As a parent, if you have one of those older,
yes.
But you never stop being a parent,
Well,
do you?
of course. And you love them.
Yes.
And, you want to support them,
Yeah.
but, don't rescue them. Do not rescue them. Let them figure it out.
They have to fail sometimes in order to grow and learn and move forward.
Or get tired of their lifestyle.
Yeah.
Their lifestyle might be like, well, I'm just working from paycheck to paycheck. I just heard someone say this last night. Well, I was working paycheck to paycheck and kind of figured out I wanted more of a life than that.
Well, thanks for coming in and talking
You're
to us
welcome.
about this. There is a blog post on this. We'll have a link to that on ky3.com. This is Dr. Jennifer Baker of Good Dads on
Yeah.
This Live Life Well.
Thank you.